The Statue of Liberty is standing on a broken chain. There is a shackle around her right ankle and a length of snapped iron trailing from it, and almost no one who has ever visited her has seen it. You cannot see it from the ferry. You cannot see it from the crown. It faces the open water, half buried in the folds of her robe, placed so precisely out of sight that for most of a century most Americans did not know it was there at all. She was not built to welcome immigrants. That meaning came later, bolted on. What she was actually built to commemorate is lying under her feet, in iron, in the one place you were never meant to look. Go to the National Park Service's own description of the monument, and you will find it stated without drama. At the foot of the statue lie a broken shackle and chain, and the Park Service describes them plainly as symbols of freedom from oppression and servitude. Not immigration, not the huddled masses. Freedom from servitude. The chains are real, cast into the original 1886 monument, angled toward the sea and covered by the drape of her gown so completely that a visitor standing directly beneath her cannot make them out. You have to be above her to see them at all. A monument that rises 300 feet from the ground to the tip of the torch, seen by more than 4 million people every year, and the single object that explains why she was built is the one piece of her placed where the public cannot stand. Everyone on Earth knows what the Statue of Liberty means. Almost no one has ever seen what she's standing on. To understand the chain, you have to go back to a dinner that may not have happened quite the way it is always told. The year is 1865. The place is a house at Glatigny, outside Versailles, belonging to a French legal scholar named Édouard René de Laboulaye. Laboulaye was not a dreamer or a sculptor. He was one of the most prominent abolitionists in France, a leader of the French anti-slavery society, a man who had spent his career studying the United States precisely because of the war it was then finishing. That spring the Union had won. Slavery had been abolished, and weeks later, Abraham Lincoln was shot in a theatre in Washington. According to the traditional account, Laboulaye gathered a circle of like-minded French liberals and proposed a monument. Not a monument to America in the abstract, a monument to a specific thing that had just occurred. A nation had freed 4 million enslaved people, and the man who signed the order had been murdered for it. France, still ruled by an Emperor Laboulaye quietly despised, would give the young republic a gift celebrating emancipation, and in doing so hold up a mirror to the autocrats at home. The sculptor he chose was Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, and when Bartholdi began to shape the figure, he built the commission into her body. In his early studies, the woman is not holding a tablet. She's grappling with broken chains, shackles snapped and lifted, the manacles of bondage shattered in her hands and lying broken at her feet. The statue's first language was not law. It was the breaking of chains, raised where everyone could see them. Somewhere between the first models and the final bronze, the chains moved. The broken shackles in her arms were gone, replaced by a tablet inscribed with a date, July 4th, 1776, in Roman numerals. The chains at her feet were not removed. They were relocated and hidden, pushed under the hem of her robe and turned toward the empty harbour, demoted from the thing she held up to the thing you would have to fly over her to find. The stated reason, when one is offered at all, is aesthetic. A woman holding the tablet of law reads as a more universal, more dignified figure than a woman brandishing manacles. That is a real argument, and I am not going to pretend it isn't. But look at when the change happened, and who was being asked to pay. By the early 1870s, the project needed enormous sums of American money to build the pedestal, and the Americans being courted for it included men whose fortunes traced, directly or a half step removed, to the very labour those chains referred to. A monument standing in New York Harbour that openly declared itself a celebration of emancipation was a difficult sell in a country still raw from the war and already busy dismantling reconstruction. The historian Edward Berenson of New York University, in the definitive transatlantic history of the statue published by Yale, has traced how the emancipation meaning was steadily muted as the monument crossed the Atlantic and turned into an American fundraising campaign. The broken chain did not disappear because it had stopped being true. It went under her feet because the truth had become inconvenient to the people whose signatures were needed to stand her up. The stated reason was dignity. The timing tells a different story. And here, the story drops a trapdoor beneath itself. Because before the figure in New York Harbour was ever named Liberty, before the chains, before Laboulaye's dinner, Bartholdi had already designed her once, for a different country, and a purpose that had nothing to do with freedom at all. In the 1860s, Bartholdi travelled through Egypt and became fixated on colossal scale, on the monuments of the ancient Nile, and the idea of building something modern to rival them. He drew up a proposal for the entrance of the newly cut Suez Canal, an enormous robed woman, a fella, an Egyptian peasant, holding a torch above her head and serving as a working lighthouse to guide ships into the canal. He gave the concept a name, Egypt carrying the light to Asia. He made watercolours and clay models. The robe fell in heavy folds, the figure stood upright, the torch was raised in precisely the gesture you would recognise today. He pitched it to the ruler of Egypt, the Khedive Ismail Pasha, who considered it and then declined, judging it far too expensive. Within a few years, the same sculptor was building the same essential figure, torch lifted, robe falling, colossal, for a harbour in the United States. Historians disagree about how directly the Suez design became the Statue of Liberty, and Bartholdi himself always downplayed the connection. But the drawings survive. The lighthouse woman and the harbour woman are unmistakably kin. The monument the world reads as the ultimate symbol of American freedom began life as a piece of infrastructure for a French-built canal, cut through colonised Egypt, meant to stand over passing ships as a beacon, and to mean nothing at all. Then there is the piece almost everyone believes is original to her, and is not. The lines everyone can half quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses," are from a sonnet called The New Colossus, written by Emma Lazarus in 1883 to help raise money for the pedestal. It was not part of the statue. It was not read aloud at the 1886 dedication. It was cast onto a bronze plaque and mounted inside the pedestal in 1903, 17 years after she was unveiled, and it is that poem, added almost a generation late, that welded the statue permanently to immigration in the American imagination. Her most famous meaning is younger than she is. The fair objection is that symbols are allowed to grow, that a monument can mean emancipation, and immigration, and universal liberty all at once, and that reading intrigue into the folds of a bronze gown is exactly the kind of thing this genre does badly. That is a serious point, and I want to hold on to it. What I cannot get past is that all three meanings that came before the comfortable one, the colonial lighthouse, the freed slave, the broken chain, are the three you were never taught and never shown. I keep returning to one number, 17 years. That is the gap between the moment the statue was dedicated and the moment the poem that supposedly explains her was fixed. For 17 years she stood in the harbour meaning something older, or meaning nothing settled at all, and then a meaning was chosen and bolted to her in bronze, and within a generation it was the only meaning anyone remembered. That unsettled me more than any single fact, because it is so ordinary. Nobody had to burn a document. Nobody had to lie under oath. You simply add the new plaque, stop mentioning the old models, angle the chains toward the water and wait. Wait long enough, and the people who remember the first meaning die, and their grandchildren inherit the second one as though it had always been the first. The editing of a monument does not require a secret. It only requires time and a public that never thinks to look down. That is the pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A monument does not have to be torn down to be rewritten. Its meaning can be moved the way Bartholdi moved the chains, out of the hands where everyone sees, down to the feet where no one stands. First, she is a lighthouse for a canal. Then she is emancipation, chains lifted high. Then the chains slip under her robe and the tablet slides into her arm, and she becomes liberty in the abstract, law with no subject, freedom with no one it freed. Then a poem arrives and she becomes the mother of immigrants. Every layer is real. Every layer buries the one beneath it, and the version placed in your hands, the welcoming figure lifting her lamp beside the golden door, is the fourth meaning stacked on three older ones you were never told existed. Think about what that does to everything you were taught to read at a glance. You have walked past 100 monuments and never once asked whether the meaning on the plaque is the meaning they were built with, or a meaning chosen for you later, after the founders were gone and the story could be smoothed. The Statue of Liberty is not an exception to how public memory is made. She is the clearest example we have, standing in the busiest harbour in the country, photographed more than almost any object on Earth, still carrying at her feet the one piece of evidence that contradicts her official story, in bronze, in the open, where being visible to everyone has somehow kept her invisible. You do not need an archive to check this. The next time you see her, in a film, on a coin, on the inside cover of a passport, do the one thing her design was built to prevent. Look at her feet. There is a chain there, broken, cast by an abolitionist sculptor to mark 4 million people set free and a president killed for freeing them. It has been under her robe for 139 years. Most of the people who love her have never seen it. And the fact that they haven't is not an accident of drapery. It is the entire point of where it was placed. So what is she then? She's a lighthouse that never lit a canal. She's a monument to emancipation that hid its own chains. She's a symbol of immigration that said nothing about immigration for the first 17 years of her life. She's all of these, and she's officially none of them, because the meaning we finally settled on is the one that asks the least of us, the one that requires no explanation and points at nobody's fortune, nobody's crime, nobody's war. The chains are still there. That is what I come back to. They were not filed away in a vault or painted over or quietly removed in some later restoration. They were left exactly where Bartholdi cast them, in full daylight, in the middle of the harbour, on the most looked-at statue in the world. Whoever shaped her final meaning did not need to destroy the evidence. They only needed to place it where you would never think to stand, and trust that a thing seen by everyone would be examined by no one. The tablet in her arm carries a date, July 4th, 1776. The chain at her feet has no date, no plaque, no words at all. One of them is the story we tell about her. The other is the story she was built to tell, broken in bronze, facing the water, waiting 139 years for someone on the ferry to look down and ask why the Statue of Freedom is standing on the very thing that freedom breaks.